Hey everybody, I know it's been a while. I'm back with another tutorial for you on how to take a piece of artwork and turn it into a 3D printable logo. I've got this logo here that was sent to me by a client who wants to make it into a 3D printable and wearable sign sort of thing that's got this little loop on it. So I'm going to show you how to make that. Now, first things first, we're going to have to figure out how to turn this logo into vector art. That way our 3D application can actually read it and extrude it and turn it into something that's 3D printable. Now, what I've got on screen here is autotracer.org, and there are a number of free vectorizer applications online. However, I will not be using that option. It's also similar to the trace function inside of Adobe's Illustrator, and I won't be using any Adobe software either. I've been sort of avoiding them for a while, and then now because of all the extra controversy they've landed themselves in, I'm definitely going to continue to avoid them. So today we're going to be working with Inkscape, and I'll also show you how to do this inside of Affinity Designer 2. Both of them are great alternatives to Adobe software. Affinity is on sale right now. It's a one-time purchase for the entire version that you get. So right now we're on version 2. I won't have to pay again until we get to version 3, which probably won't happen for quite some time. And then Inkscape is a free and open source vector drawing illustration application that you can get in case you don't want to spend any money, which I completely understand. So really quickly, let's take a look here. We've got autotracer.org. You can see this is the result that it's giving me for this image that I've fed it. It's a bit jagged around the edges, and this could lead to other problems when trying to turn this into a 3D model. So I'm going to avoid that. If you want a quick and dirty result that may or may not print well, you can definitely use something like this. There's also vectorizer.com. There's vectorizer.ai. And this is giving me an issue from the last time I uploaded an image, but it does work. If I were to throw this image in here again, let me just do that real quickly. And there we go. We can get the logo in there, and it's not awful. We could probably use that. And then we've got another one over here. So there's a whole lot of free options over here for turning your artwork into vector art that is usable. Obviously, if you're starting off with vector art, that's ideal. But anyhow, enough chit chat. Let's just jump right on into Inkscape, and I'm going to show you how I create this. So I'm going to throw that image in here. It's a PNG. I'm just going to hit OK. And it's got the background cut out, but it is rather pixelated. So I'm just going to click here. Make sure you've got snapping turned on. That'll make things a little more snappy, and pun intended. So we'll click on this, and if I hold down Control and Shift, it'll let me snap that, and then here I can just kind of snap it like this. Let's go to our align and distribute settings, make sure we're relative to the page, and I'm just going to center this artwork in the middle of my page here. All right, so now I'm going to grab a grid line, I'm going to move this down here, and let's do another one. Well, there, another one here, and another one here. All right, so let's kind of zoom in on this P and let's get to work. Whoops, I accidentally clicked out. All right, here we go. So I'm going to grab a rectangle. We're just going to draw this shape like this. And I'm going to come over here to my fill options. We don't want to fill, but I do want a stroke. And let's make it white so we can kind of see what's going on underneath. So with the selection tool here, if you click on your object a number of times, it'll actually change between rotating and scaling. So I'm going to hit Control D to duplicate this, click on it, and then hold down the Control key as I rotate this in order to snap by increments. And then we can just start to build out the shape of our P. And move this over here, Control D, and then hold down Control as I move it down so that it stays right in the up and down axis there, the Y axis. And I wish it was like Affinity Designer where I could just hold down Control and duplicate by dragging, but that's not how this works. I got to keep reminding myself. So here we go, Control D, and just kind of create that shape there. And I'm going to move this up here. Now what I can do is let me duplicate another one of these and just put it to the side because we're going to use those later. And I'm going to select everything in here and just hit Control plus. And let me undo that actually because there was something I forgot. But where you can find that option actually is right here in the path option, and that's going to be under Union. We can also use the shape builder, which is similar to Illustrator shape builder and affinities, but I'm going to exit that because I need to select these and just kind of move them up a little bit here and there. And there we go. Now I can select this, select the whole thing in Control plus, and it creates that outline. Now, if I use this option over here, the node tool, hit the N key if you want to access that with hotkey. I'm going to select those, hold down shift, select these, and just delete them because they're not really contributing anything to the overall shape. They're just artifacts that were left over from before or from the shapes that we used to create this composite. And then I'm going to double click over here, select this one and hit delete. And we've got that nice little tilt in our P now. And I can move this up just a little bit to make sure that it's a little bit closer to what the original looks like underneath. And then do the same thing here, double click here, double click there, delete this one. And the cool thing about the node tool is I can actually click and drag on line segments and it will actually allow me to kind of shape that curve. I can select this one over here and just double click this corner. And you can see here now how we are creating the outline of our shape. So there we go, we're almost done. We just need this little part back here. So I'm just going to go over here, double click here, double click right about where that line is. And if you're having issues with snapping, you can actually turn off the snapping option there and just double click there, then turn this back on. And then we're going to grab this, hold control, and just kind of drag it out like that. And if we want to get it to be a little more round, we can round this out later. But for now, I think that's fine. All right, and so there's our letter P. So if I hit the S key, which is the shortcut for selection, so if you hover over all these, you'll get different hotkeys for what to press in order to get these different options. So I use S and N quite a bit in order to switch between my selection and node selection tools. And then again, hit Control D to duplicate this, hold Control, and just drag this over and kind of line this up. Let's turn off my snapping, or better yet, yours will probably look like this by default. I'm going to hit Advanced Mode, and I'm going to turn off midpoints, line midpoints, and anything that's got midpoints, because that seems to want to snap in ways that I don't want it to snap. So hopefully this will work. So bounding box corner to bounding box corner. So let's go down here, alignment, and let's find bounding box. Page borders, page margins. Actually, I want those on. I'm just looking for bounding box corners. All right, let's turn that corner off, and that should be fine. Okay, so now I should have less trouble. There we go. Nice. All right, let's take this. Let's drag it over right on top of this I, and then hit Control D to duplicate. And then we're just going to bring it over this leg on the R and just kind of scale that down right about there. And we need to move it over just a little bit more. So let's do that. Issues with snapping again. So I'm just going to toggle that off just to get this into place right about there, and then turn it back on. And then now I can hit the N key. We're having issues adding a node point, and that's because I need to go to path, object to path. And then now you can see those corners have shifted, and I can double click here and I can add another point, which will snap to this connection here. Maybe move this one down just a little bit. And there we go. So now we've got our R, hit the S key, select both of these, shift select that, and shift select the bottom one, Control plus. And there we go. We've got the R. Our I is already done. Let's hit Control D and shift this over just a little bit. And then move this over like so. And then Control D, and we'll just hold Control, move this over. And the same deal over here, Control D, move this over. Now, if we wanted to be really precise with this, let me line that up. A little bit of snapping error going on there again. And there we go. So if I wanted to be really precise with this, I could actually hold shift and just select these three, go into my line panel, and I could say distribute this with even horizontal gaps, and that'll kind of shift this middle one over so that the spaces in between are even. Just a minor thing. Grab another rectangle, just kind of drag it out to about there, and then hit the S key, select all of these, Control plus, and there we go. Hit the N key for our node tool. Let's delete some of these extra parts over here that are not contributing to the shape, just to keep things a little more clean. And then we'll add some back in. Obviously, you could technically use the ones that exist there, but I don't know. There's something about doing it this way that kind of works for me. I'm going to select these two. I'm going to say align vertically just to make sure they're perfectly aligned. That's looking pretty good. And then we're going to select this one, press this button up here that adds corners, live path effect to our corner. Grab this and then pull this down so that it's nice and round, kind of containing that corner there. And then tap that again. Whoops. I guess we shouldn't have tapped that again. And there we go. Okay, so, and then if I deselect that and tap it again, it's still going to give me problems. Weird. There we go. That we'll leave it like that. And then also we need to take care of this corner here. No, I don't want to click on the guideline. I want to click on the path. Thank you very much. double click here, select this one, hit delete, and then maybe bring this one up just a little bit, just this one. There we go. And that should be okay. So there we have our letter M. When we get over to this letter M, we can just duplicate this one. Let's work on our letter T. So I'm going to switch back to my S key. I'm going to hit Control D on this I, hold down Control, and just drag this over. Scale it. Control D, click, rotate, hold Control so that it snaps by 90-degree increments. Click on that one. Just get this one in place right here. And you can see how once you get used to some of these controls, it actually becomes very quick and easy to build some of these shapes up. Just like so. And then we're going to hit Control D on this one and just drag it straight down and snap it to the bottom. And then we want to combine all these. So we're going to hit Control plus, but we're missing this little fin on the back of the E. So we're going to grab this R, Control D, drag it on over, and make sure it lines up properly here. And I'm noticing that there's an issue with my E on the left side. So let me hit the N key, grab all these points, align them vertically, and then delete all these extra points in the middle that are not contributing to the overall shape or contour of our E. And then just kind of shift this back until everything lines up. Hit the N key, grab everything except for, and holding down Shift to grab these two, except for that little fin. Hit the S key, hold down Shift, add to the E, or click the E, and then Control plus, and there we go. We've got the same exact fin that we've got over here on our R. Let me take another look at our R. I noticed that because this was made with the P, which has this little swoop here, we've also got a little swoop going on in the R that doesn't technically exist in the artwork underneath. So I'm going to delete this one. I'm going to select both of these. I'm going to hit straight and also corner, and then I'm going to align them horizontally, drag them down, drag them back up. And we can round that out later on if we need to, but I think that's looking pretty good. All right, grab this, Control D, and we want to select it. Come on. Let's use our selection tool instead. That way it's not trying to select points that don't exist there. Let's drag that on over. And if I hold down Shift, I can actually increase the size from both sides. Control D, click, hold down Control, rotate. Bring this up here, move this in, move this in, move this up. Select both, Control plus. There we go. Easy. And then we're going to bring the I, the M, and the E over. So Control D, and then hold Control and just kind of drag them over. And they should, if it's designed well, they should be lined up with the same spacing. So it looks like it's not lined up with the same spacing. So we'll grab these two, and then hopefully these two should be lined up with the same spacing here. And let's just try to get that lined up a little bit better, right around, somewhere around there, looks fine. And then we'll move the E over just a little bit as well. There we go. All right, so we've got prime time done. Now we need to do BTX. Let's make a duplicate of the T here and just bring that down, like so. Let's make sure that it's actually aligned here. There we go. And just kind of bring that over here. Now the B, we can use an R for the B. So let's hit Control C, zoom in over here, Control V. And then let's get this lined up. And that's looking pretty good where it is. We just need to add in a little bottom bar over here, just like that. And then we're going to hit our S key, shift select this one, and hit Control plus, and then the N key, and we can get rid of some of this extra stuff over here, like so. And this one too, or actually this one we could probably bring down here like that, and then double click here and select this, delete it, and that looks fine. And then the last but not least, we need our X. So let's just borrow this I, bring it on down, there we go, and make sure that's lined up, looking good so far. So let's move this over here and move that out this way. And then we're going to hit the N key. We're going to put in some extra, oh, maybe this one isn't converted. Let's object path and let's try that again. There we go. And then we'll just move this over like so. Let's also create a couple more points here. And we'll put this one here and this one right here. Grab both of these, make sure they're vertically aligned together. And we can kind of grab these points and just kind of shape them a little bit better. Bring this one down just a little bit. There we go. And then this one can probably come down a little bit. And if we want these to be rounded, we can grab both of those, press this round tool, just like so, and just kind of round it out a little bit. That way it's not, you know, sharp. unless you want it sharp. And then what I can do is hit the S key, hit Control D to make a duplicate, hit the H key to flip it horizontally, hold Control and just move it over, grab both of those, Control plus, and there we go. We've got our X. I can kind of squish that in just a little bit, just a tiny bit, and that's looking pretty good. There is our whole artwork done. So now what I can do is I can open up my layers, layer 1, we can hide this image underneath, and then I can grab all of prime time up here, hit Control plus, make that one object, grab the BTX down here, Control plus, and we're going to call this yellow. And this one, I'm just going to call this composite. Okay, and then I'm going to turn my image back on, and I'm going to create one more rectangle right here and just try to line it up with the cyan and magenta line. But instead, I'm going to move this right about there. So we've got a guide. Then hit the S key and then just move this up so that snaps onto the guide. It's not doing that, so let's just go back here and say grids, guidelines, borders, corners, edges, midpoints, and let's see if that works now. For some reason, it doesn't want to snap. Let's try one more time. Well, we could probably eyeball it. That should be fine. All right, so now I'm going to shift select this. I'm going to come up here to path, and I'm going to say, where is it? Fracture. All right, so now I can select this part up here, just delete that, and then there's going to be extra parts inside of these. So I'm just going to select these right here, and then same thing with this other M over here. Just grab all that, hit delete, and there we go. So the top part is going to be magenta. So this we're going to join together with Control plus, and we're going to call this magenta. And the bottom part, I'm going to select and hit Control plus and call this cyan. All right, and there we go. There's all of our artwork for prime time. I'm going to create 3 small squares, something like that. And I'm going to hit Control D and we'll move it down. And then Control D and move it down again. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to change the fill color for all of these to match the colors of the artwork. And then we'll assign that to the art. So this is not 100% necessary to do. We could probably skip this part in all honesty, but it's just for the sake of consistency. It'll keep our artwork consistent across everything that we do when we go into other applications as well. And again, it's not going to matter in the end because the colors that you're going to 3D print this out as are going to be determined by your filament systems more so than anything else. But, you know, for the sake of my own interest, I'm going to do it this way. So we're going to grab cyan. I'm going to come over here. We're going to get rid of the stroke and give it a fill. And then we're going to take this fill over here of the cyan. We're going to take the yellow. We're going to give it a fill. We're going to select this. And then we're going to get rid of the stroke. And then do the same thing for the magenta, no stroke. Come over here, give it a solid fill, and select the magenta. And then we can select all 3 of these and hit delete, and we've got it. All good. So now we can select all this, and we can say File, Export, and let me grab my working directory over here. I'm going to paste it in over here, and I'm going to say slash primetime.svg. And I'm going to change this to a plain SVG, and we're going to say export selected only, and it should export without a problem. And there we go. We've got our scalable vector graphic for this. Now I'm going to show you how I do the second piece of artwork here in Affinity Designer because I find it's actually faster for me to work in Affinity Designer. But this is how this is going to work. I've already created the text here, and this is just Helvetica Neue 48.5 bold. And that was just what I could do to try to replicate the text that was already on there. Obviously, if you know what the font is or you're creating this from scratch, it'll be a lot easier. But, you know, this just to save a little bit of time because I don't want to create all of these letters one by one. I just used a little bit of text there to try to approximate it, and it should be fine. All right, so now what we're going to do is I'm going to create a rectangle over here, and we're just going to work on creating the shapes up here. So I'm going to make this, we're going to flip that over, make this white. So that way we're working with outlines so we can actually see our artwork underneath. That'll make it a lot easier to trace this. And then what I can do now is I can just control drag them out. So the selection key here is actually V instead of S. And I'm just going to drag this out here like so and fit it to the shape. And then let's Bring this in just a little bit, and then control, click and drag, control, click and drag, and then move. And I already had my grids or my guides set up, but it's done virtually the same way in most of these applications. You just drag off of the ruler, and it should work. There we go. Let's make another one of these, and we're going to rotate holding shift. So in this one, it's not control to snap, but it's shift, similar to a lot of other software. And there we go. We've got this going on here. Let me make a duplicate of this that we can drag off over here. There we go. And then the rest of this, I'm going to select it and then hit plus there. And there we go. We've got that shape. And then we're going to move this over here and then click and drag, rotate, move it into place, move this over here, move this up. And don't worry about this shape here. We're going to fix that in a little bit. Let's get this one down here. And then let's move this one down here. And we'll do this. This one is hold control in order to get it to move from both sides. And we'll move this a little bit and then bring this one out just a tiny bit. All right, so now we can take this and we'll hit plus there. And like I said, we'll fix that part later. This one I'm gonna do with the pen tool. So hit the P key and just kind of trace along this W. Since it's not as blocky as the other shapes, and I'm just holding down shift to get this to align to a straight direction. And then we'll go over here. And I'm just kind of doing this quickly because I'm going to fix all the shapes when I'm done anyways, so I'm not worried too much about things. And then hit the A key for your node tool, similar to what we had with the N key inside of Inkscape. And then I just make a selection over here and use my alignment tools to align them to the right. We're going to align these all to the center on the vertical axis here. Same thing here. And then make sure that these are lined up to the left and right as well, so that they're directly above each other. And we're forming nice 90-degree angles. Another thing we can do is grab these three and let's also align them horizontally. And if we really wanted to, we could go through here and mess with all of the points and make sure that they're perfectly aligned. But I think this is looking good enough. Doesn't have to be the most accurate thing in the world. It looks pretty good. I think I do want to take this one and just kind of nudge it to the right a little bit. And then this one and this one will nudge also just slightly to the right. There we go. I think that looks pretty good. Take this one. Whoops. And yeah, it should be fine. All right, moving right along. Let's create another cube, or another, not a cube, but a rectangle. And I do want to leave just the slightest of space in between these two. If I were to redesign this, I would probably pay more close attention to all the spaces between the letters because they're feeling a little bit smushed together. Whoever made this original artwork may have had space constraints or something like that. So that's something I would like to do as a designer. But for now, we'll just work with the artwork that we have. Grab the pen tool, click here, down here, up here, and then close it up. And then hit the V key and then shift select all these other parts. And then just add those together. And then we're going to do the D letter here, letter D, just like this. And then we'll hit Control C, Control V, that pastes in place, and then hold Control and just kind of scale this down to about there. Looks good. And then what we can do with this one is hit the A key. We're going to convert this to curves, hit the A key, hit the C key, which is this corner tool right here, and then just kind of curve these corners in like so. Same thing over here on this one. Same deal. And just get it to look relatively similar. And there we go. There's the letter D. And we want to take this one, hit the V key, take this one, and then hit our subtract button so it all becomes one shape. All right. So let's go over here. Let's make another one. We're going to do it virtually the same way. Control C, Control V, and then I'm just going to scale this up like so. And then hold Control, scale it in like that. Grab this bottom one, hit the A key. Hold on, A key, select, convert to curves, grab these two corners, hit C, and just kind of round that out. Same thing here, grab this, round that out. And then we can take these two shapes, hit the V key, and then we can subtract. There we go. And then we're basically going to do the same thing for the P over here. So we're going to grab this like so, and then take this over here like that. Hit the V key, kind of scale that in a little bit. Take this, just move it out just a little bit like that. And then we're going to grab both of those, merge them together, and then another rectangle. And let's go from this corner here. So let's make sure we have that selected. Grab another rectangle, and we're going to bring this up, and then just like that. This way, it's all lined up right here relative to the edge of this P. And then convert that to curves, and I can select both of them and just kind of nudge that over a little bit, ever so slightly. Because it's so pixelated, it's hard to see exactly where it starts and ends. So I'm trying to approximate it. All right, now we can grab these two edges, hit the C key, and fold that down or round that out, I guess. And then again here, round this out. And then we're going to hit the V key and select both of these, just like this, and hit subtract. And then the last thing we've got over here is this circle. Just try to get in the middle, hold down Control and Shift, and there we go. Close enough. And then the last thing we need to do is we need to fix this E over here. So I'm going to create a circle, just kind of squash it, just like this, until we're getting roughly close to the shape of subtraction there. So something like this looks pretty good. And then Shift select this and hit subtract. Although we probably want this on top. I don't know why it's on the bottom. Subtract. There we go. And there we go. There's our Wind Up Podcast logo. Let me put a black background in place so that we can actually see the work that we've done. Just drop this to the bottom and set its background color to black. There we go. And then select all of this stuff up here. Let's grab our selection tool. Whoops. Lock that, please. There we go. Select all this and set it to red. So we'll flip this around and set it to red. And there we go. There's our logo. Again, spacing, I would like to make this space probably a little bit better in here. And I can see in the artwork, these almost look like they're completely connected. So what I can do is I can just make this a little bit wider so they're touching each other, grab both of those and connect them. That might present some issues in the 3D modeling. So let me overlap them a little bit more, and then that should hopefully do a little bit better. But we are pretty close to what the original artwork calls for. So, you know, it is what it is. All right, so now I'm going to turn everything off. I'm going to select all this, and I'm going to make sure that all of the red parts are combined as one, and the white parts are also combined as one and not as text, because if I try to export this as text, it's not going to show up as an SVG. So make sure that all your text is converted down into curves here. And then now I'm going to select everything and hit File, Export. And that's going to pop up my SVG dialog box here. We're just going to export it. And I'm going to call this windup.svg, and that'll save into my directory. All right, so that's all of the vector art part of our tutorial. That took us about 30 minutes with me talking through everything, and I showed you how to do it in both applications. So I apologize for how long that may have felt. Hopefully you learned something. In the next part, we're going to open things up inside of Fusion, Autodesk Fusion. This is a not for commercial use version, so this is for educational purposes only, or personal use. So if you want to use this, I would check out their licensing and make sure that it can do what you need it to do. Obviously, if you're trying to do this for commercial purposes, you're going to have to buy a license. This is why I prefer to use Blender, and I'm going to show you how to do this in Blender as well, but let's start off in Fusion because I know it's a very popular application. So let's click up here, go to the top view. I'm going to hit Insert. We're going to insert an SVG. It's going to ask me to look for the SVG. I'm going to hit Insert from my computer. I've got a dialog box on my left screen, and we're going to start with the Primetime SVG. And that's going to pop in. Let's click this axis, and there we go. So we're just going to say finish. Actually, I'm going to move it and drag this and move it so it's roughly centered in the world. Doesn't have to be perfect. There, it looks good. And then we're going to hit finish sketch, and that should be good to go. Now, if I hit Shift and the middle mouse button, I can kind of tumble my view, which makes it easier for me to get around the scene. And then middle mouse button allows me to kind of move around the scene. And what I want to do now is I want to make an extrusion for my letters. So we're going to hit extrude over here, and I'm just going to click on here and then hold down the shift key and start clicking all the rest of the stuff that I want to extrude. And I'm going to extrude this by 2 millimeters. So I'm going to hit 2. maybe even 3 actually, because of the size of this is pretty large. So like 3 or 4, I think 3 millimeters is fine. And we're going to leave this on new body and say okay. And we need our sketch back in order to do more extrusion. So I'm going to unhide the sketch. I'm going to hit extrude again, select here, hold down shift. And we did 3 for this one. So I'm going to say a distance of 3 and hit okay. And then we're going to do the same thing again. Select here, 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 here. Just select all the stuff that we want to extrude. You could probably drag select this if you're looking at it from the right angle. We're going to hit 3 millimeters. And here we need to do something special because these two are touching each other. And instead of saying join, we're going to say new body. And that will allow us to have these bodies that are separated from each other. We can hide our sketches now. And that will prevent it from fusing into a singular object, which will allow us to assign different colors inside of our 3D print slicer. Now, if I were to try to 3D print these letters as they're extruded currently, I could do that. The only problem is when I go to get it off the print bed, they're going to be loose, and I won't have any reference to be able to guide me as far as the spacing in between the letters and the design. And you could also run into additional problems where if you don't wait for it to cool down enough or it's not thick enough, when you go to pry these off your print bed, they may warp and bend, which we really don't want either. So in order to solve that problem, I'm actually going to create a new sketch with this button over here. We're going to choose this axis facing down from the top, and I'm just going to create a rectangle that goes from the top left down to the bottom right, making sure that it's encompassing the entire design. Something roughly about this shape should be okay. So I'm just going to click in that corner, click over here. And I'm also going to click in this corner, and we're going to come up here and do the same thing over here. And maybe we'll give this a little extra room on the side of the X. I'm just trying to visually do this. And that should be fine, and hit finish sketch. Okay, so now that we have that, let's turn our sketches back on. We'll turn our bottom sketch off, and we'll leave sketch 2 on. And what we can do now is hit the extrude button and just select this inner portion, hold down shift and middle mouse button, and I'm going to say -4 millimeters, and that's going to extrude it downwards. We're not going to join it. We're going to say new body and hit OK. And that's looking like a pretty good base plate. It's a little bit thicker than the letters themselves, but it's close enough that it shouldn't cause any issues. And let's go from the top again. Let's go into this sketch. I want to modify this sketch. So I'm going to double click right over here. That'll get me back into sketch mode. I'm going to create a circle, and let's just make sure I'm in the top. There we go. And I'm going to put the circle right about here, and I want to make it something like, I think 40 millimeters should be fine. And then I want to zoom in a little bit, and then we'll do something like this. And then I'm going to take this and just kind of make a line there, make a line here. And then I can take my trim tool and I can just trim some of this stuff in here. Because we don't, oops, let me undo that. I didn't mean to trim all of those. I just want to trim this and this, this, and this, and this. And now what this is going to allow me to do is I'll be able to, let's deselect that. What I'll be able to do now, I'll grab my select tool and see if I can select this and move it a little bit closer. So let's try to move, and I can probably get that a little closer there. Maybe even something like this. So this is that little loop that we can use to hang it from something if we want to make it into like a wearable or something like that. Finish that sketch, turn that sketch back on, sketch 2, and then come back out here, grab this part of the sketch, and then hit extrude. And then we're going to do -4, I believe is what we did. And this time we can join it because we do want it to be joined to the actual base part. And so there you go. You can see we've created that little loop. That way when we 3D print this, we can turn it into like a little wearable or something. And then the last thing that I want to do, let's hide our sketches now. We don't really need them anymore. Is I'm going to select some of these edges here and just go around and select these edges. And I'll show you what we're going to do with that in a second. And I bet you there's probably an easier way to select some of these edges all the way around. I know that there's a way to do it in some other 3D software. I just haven't used Fusion 360 or Fusion in a very long time. And so I'm not up to date on all of the shortcuts and whatnot. All right, so now that I've selected all those parts, I can go over here to my fillet, and we can just fillet it just a little bit if it lets me. So maybe 2.5 millimeters looks pretty good. That way it's got a little more of a round part to it and it looks nice. So now that's our 3D object that we've created from our SVG artwork inside of Fusion. It's pretty easy. Fusion is a nice parametric modeler. I keep forgetting that I don't want to tumble out of view. I just want to move it. And there we go. So now what we can do is we can say file. We can actually send this to 3D print directly out of here, but I'm just going to hit export and I'm going to call this prime time printable. And instead of setting this as an Autodesk Fusion archive file, I'm going to set this as an STL file, and I'm going to export it. Okay, and there we go. So then we can bring that into our slicer, and we should be able to 3D print that. I'm also going to show you how to do this inside of Blender. So we're going to go to File, Import, Scalable Vector Graphics, and I'm going to grab my working directory like this, and we're going to grab our wind up SVG. That's going to show up somewhere in here. There we go. And there it is. So I'm going to snap to the top view using my middle mouse button to rotate around, hold down Alt, or alternatively, we could just click here like we did inside of Fusion. And I'm going to add a mesh of the plane. So you can do that up here. I just use Shift A inside of here. And let me turn on my screencast keys so you can actually see when I'm pressing. Hopefully that'll help out. So Shift A, there you go. You can see it down there. Shift A, mesh, plane. And then I'm going to hit the N key to open up my side menu, go to the item tab, and I'm going to change the dimensions of this to 7.5 inches. That way I have a reference for how big I want this to print out. So we're going to want to work within this size here. And I'm just going to grab this and just kind of move it in there. It's actually pretty close. That looks okay for the most part. I think this should be all right. I'm just going to kind of get it in center with the axes here. And then I'm going to hit right click and say set origin to 3D cursor. That way the origin is right there in the middle of the world. And then I can hit F2 on this and call it ref and then hit H to hide it. And there we go. So we've got our wind up podcast. I'm going to select this, and we're going to go over here to my object data properties. These are curve objects, as we can see here in our outliner. I'm going to go down to geometry, extrude, and say 0.02. That's way too much. So 0.002. That looks pretty good. Right click and say copy to selected. So everything gets that amount of thickness. And then I'm going to make a duplicate of this. Right click to leave it in place. Hit the M key, new collection. We're going to call this backup just in case I need to reference this later. And then we're going to hide that. And then we're going to select both of these, Control A, and say visual geometry to mesh. And what that's going to do is convert this from a curve object into flat geometry. It won't have the prettiest geometry, but it'll work for what we're going for. I'm also going to right click and say shade flat to get rid of this weird shading because it kind of bothers me. And then now what we can do is, looking at it from the side view, I'm going to hold Alt to snap into my side view. Again, you can use this widget over here. I'm going to hit tab and go to face mode. Yours will probably look different. You can switch modes here or just hit tab and go to edit mode and then select faces up there. I have an add-on that lets me do it just right here. And then hit Alt Z in order to go into X-ray mode and just drag select all of this stuff. If your select is not the same as mine, hit the T key on the left side and just change your selection to box select. That's what I use most of the time. There are also a bunch of other selection modes over here for whatever you need. And then hit T, not up top, but on the side. I don't really like this positional thing now. I would just prefer that it opened up the side menu. I'm sure that there's a setting I can change for that, but whatever, it's fine. And then anyhow, now that I've got in X-ray mode, which is toggleable here, or just hit Alt-Z, I can drag select all these bottom faces. And for me, I'll use a keyboard shortcut, but for you, you'll have to do it manually. So you'll have to hit Shift-S, cursor to selected, go out in object mode, right-click, say set origin to 3D cursor. I have a shortcut key that does that for me. And the reason I want to do that is I want the origin to be at the very bottom of my stuff here. And so I need to open up my snapping and make sure that we have absolute grid snap turned on. And then when I hit this GZ, and then G is for moving, Z is for the axis that I'm constraining to. So I'm constraining to the Z axis, as we can see here. I'm going to hold Control and just make sure that snaps on top of the grid. So obviously, if I was just working on this and not explaining it, I could do this so much faster. But because I have to explain it, it slows things down. So it may look like it's slow, but I promise you, when you're actually like used to this stuff and working on it, it goes really fast. I get that comment from a lot of people, oh, it takes so long to do stuff in Blender. Yeah, it's because I'm explaining it. If I were to do this without explaining it to you, it'd be super fast. Anyhow, I'm going to hit Shift-C to reset my 3D cursor to the center of the world, and I'm going to make another plane here. And I'm going to look at it from the top and just kind of scale it down to sort of encompass the whole thing here. And I'm going to tab into edge mode and I'm not going to explain as much stuff anymore. Also, what I just did here was, now that I'm in edge mode, I hit Control R to insert a loop cut, and then I can right click just to reset that. If you don't like using the shortcuts, you've got an option over here to do this right here, loop cut. It's the same thing. I just use the keyboard shortcuts because it's easier. Grab this loop up here, double tap G, move it down, and that was alt clicking that loop in order to, or that edge to grab it, or you could just, select this and deselect that. There's a million different ways to do the same thing in 3D. Double tap G, kind of drag this up a little bit. I'm going to move this podcast down. You'll see why in a minute. And then I'm going to grab this loop and just kind of double click and shift it over. We're going to put another loop in right about here, and we're going to move this stuff down. So you'll see in a minute why I want to do all this stuff, and we need another loop in right about there. So now I'm going to select this from the top, switch into X-ray mode, and I'm just going to move this down just a little bit, give it a little more space. Alt Q to switch from one object to another, and like this. Inside of edit mode without going into object mode, it just makes it a lot easier. Okay, and now what I want to do is I want to add in another loop cut right here, and we're going to grab these faces and delete them. And then now I can delete some of this stuff, and I don't think I can delete that one, but I can merge it over here. ML to merge to last, and let's do this one here, ML, merge that way. And now what I can do is I can go around, I can take these verts, and I can hit, actually, let's go out into object mode, hit Control A, and say rotation and scale. That's applying the rotation and scale, so that way when we go to bevel this, it's not going to mess anything up. And then back into edit mode, I'm going to grab these, move it out, just to make sure there's enough room around this. And I kind of want to grab this and move it down as well, just to give wind up a little more space and kind of line that up at the top of podcast. And then we'll select all these vertices, hit Control Shift B, and then we can start to add some roundness to this. I'm going to grab these on the left side, make sure I got everything on the left side, just move it. Actually, no, that's pretty good the way it is. Select everything, hit the M key, merge by distance. And then here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in. That actually made quite a big mess. So I'm going to undo that. I did it differently before. Let's say if we can do just edge loops. No. Dissolve edges. No. There's got to be a way to do this. Oh, here's an idea. Do this. Actually, we're going to grab this, make a subdivision, grab this, make a subdivision, select this, and dissolve those. And it's not doing what I want, of course. So instead, I'm just going to delete all of those edges, grab this and hit F. And then now when I go to round this all out, I don't have to worry about all that ugly extra geometry. Okay, so let me go back through what I was doing, because I know I'm rushing. Hit the X key, and then we're just going to delete the edges, and that's going to leave us with this outline. If you hold down the Alt key and click on one of these, it's going to select the whole thing, or you could just drag select the whole thing, whatever you want. Hit the F key, and then that's going to create one whole face. Switch over to vertex mode, or do that up here, whatever you want, and then hit Control Shift B, and that will allow you to bevel the edges of this whole thing here. So now we've got this nice little outline for our windup, and I can grab this and bring this in a little bit. I don't really like this unactivated space here and here, but you know what? It'll be fine. So there, we've got our base, and then all we need to do now is select this whole thing, look at it from the side, hit the E key, and just kind of extrude it down. My instinct is to snap it to the grid, and then we should do the same to the other artwork up here. So just grab this from the side, similar to how I showed you before. And I've discovered an issue. So now I need to select everything in here in vertex mode, hit M, and say by distance, and that removes like 4,000 vertices where the caps of these faces were not merged down. So this is one of the things about working in Blender that's not as great as working in Fusion 360, is you do have to worry about actual geometric issues. It's not completely parametric, but it's an easy fix when you know what you're doing. So basically what I did there was I just selected everything and just merged vertices by distance. And the default value for that is 0.0001 meters. And that just looks at these different vertices and asks, are they closer than 0.0001 meters? And if they are, it will merge them together. If they're further away than that, then it won't merge them together. And that's why we are preserving our geometry here. But anyhow, this is basically what we've got going on. I don't think the base here needs to be as thick. So again, going to the side, X-ray mode, let's move this up. And I'm just looking at it from the orthographic. So this is 3 units, this is 4 units. That's pretty good. It's similar to what we had inside of Fusion. And now that I'm happy with this, let's select all this, hit Shift N to make sure that the normals are calculated properly. Basically that we want the faces of this thing to be pointing outwards and not for it to be an inverted hull, because then we won't be able to 3D print it. And then now we can do a little bit of 3D print setup. Let me actually just add a material diffuse, plain diffuse shader to this bottom mesh here, and then change the color in the viewport display just for the sake of my own interest. There we go. So these will be the actual colors that we want it to 3D print in, but again, that will be up to your AMS system and whatever, if you've got an AMS system and whatever filaments you have. All right, so now we need to do a little checking to make sure that this will 3D print well. We should probably also do the same thing to the mesh that we extruded or exported from Fusion. I'm fairly certain that it should print fine, but just in case. Also, I forgot one thing before we do our checking is actually I want to add that little loop up here. So I'm just going to move the 3D cursor here by holding the Shift key and the right mouse button and just roughly get it into place. And I'm going to hit Shift A, add a mesh, a circle. I'm going to add 128 verts there, and it's going to be rather large. So I'm just going to kind of scale it down a little bit. Somewhere around there should be roughly fine. I'm going to move it up, go into vert mode and X-ray mode, even though I probably don't need to go into X-ray mode for this, and just select half of it and delete one half of it. I'm going to grab these two verts here, hit Shift S, cursor to selected, select the whole thing, change my transform mode to 3D cursor, hit E for extrude, and then scale this down. This way it scales right around that 3D cursor, and we have a little bit of thickness to this. And there we go. And then I'm going to select the whole thing and hit Control N, or sorry, Shift N, and then Alt Z. And then I can grab these two edges here, this one, and just kind of extrude them. Let's constrain it to the Y-axis, and there we go. So now we've got that little loop there, and we need to join these together. So first things first, let's switch our snap mode, and that's with Control Shift Tab, to vertex. I'm going to select this whole thing, hit the E key, and then I'm going to find a vertex over here, and then hold Control so it snaps. Select the whole thing, Shift N, make sure that the normals are facing the correct way. And then I'm just going to take this and move it a little closer to my body there. And then we're going to hit Shift inside of object mode and then hit Control J to join them together. And then over here, I'm going to add in a loop cut and just kind of slide this over. Let's add in another loop cut, and another loop cut. And there it is. All right, so now I'm going to go into X-ray mode and just kind of grab this, move it on the X-axis, and then snap it in alignment with the vertices on the corners of this thing that we've created here. And then what I can do now, since these are both joined, I can go into X-ray mode, select these two, Control E, bridge edge loops, and then do the same thing, Shift R, which will repeat that operation, and there we've created those bridges. I can also go into edge mode and then hit Alt and select that entire ring, and then Shift Alt to select this ring, and then hit Control X to dissolve it. And there you go. You can see we've created that loop. We can also grab this and go into X-ray mode. And if we want, we can move it over. I kind of want to keep it as close to the center as possible, because if this is going to hang off of somebody's neck or something, it's going to kind of like slant this way. And that's just due to the shape of the logo. I can kind of move it a little bit closer, something like that. And that should be okay. So normally I'd come in here and I'd grab these edges here and I'd bevel them. But because this one is so close to this edge right here, I'm actually not going to do that, because here I can show you. I mean, I could kind of do it, and then we'll just hit C to clamp the overlap. Is it actually clamping? There is an option for clamping overlap. C, there we go. Okay, so I was just not hitting the C key. Actually, that would 3D print fine. It's so small that I don't think it'd be worth it. But, you know, if you wanted to, you could. We'll leave it like that. All right, so now, last things that we should do, select everything, Control A, rotation and scale. I'm out in object mode. And one thing that we can do to check our 3D prints is go to our preferences, add-ons, and look for 3D-print. And Blender comes by default with this 3D print toolbox add-on. You just have to enable it. I already have mine enabled because I use it all the time. And then come over here and look for 3D print. and then we can actually select everything and say check all. And as long as you don't have any non-manifold edges, this should print all right. And so we have 0 here. If you do, you can actually hit make manifold, and that should help fix that up for you. Check it again to make sure this updates. Just keep in mind that sometimes when you use this make manifold thing, it can actually damage some of the letters and other things that makes it kind of changes their shape. So it will make them manifold, it will make it 3D printable, but it may also change the shape of your object. That's really important to keep in mind in the case that you're trying to machine parts or something like that that go together. You want to be really careful using this option and make sure that instead of using this, maybe you'll manually fix your geometry. And so this should 3D print without a problem. So we're going to select this whole thing. I'm going to hit Shift C to reset my 3D cursor, and then I'm going to use my shortcut to set all of my objects' origins here and hit Control J to merge them all together. Also, alternatively, you could say set origin to 3D cursor. All right, so now that that's all one object, I'm going to say File, Export, look for STL, and then I'm going to grab my working directory. There we go. And I'm going to call this wind up, turn off caps lock. There we go. And we need to turn on a couple selections over here. So we need to make sure that we're using the selection only. We're going to use the scene unit, and we're going to set our scale to 1000. And I found that that's exactly what you need to do in order to get Blender to export an STL that will work with most slicers at the correct proportions. I found that if I use a scale of 1, the object comes in really tiny. So I kind of modify that by powers of 10, and I found that 1000 is the correct measurement that I want to scale by, and this works really well for my purposes. So I'm just going to export that, and now we can go into Bambu Lab or Bambu Studio, and I've got this set up for the Bambu Lab A1, which I don't currently have. I also don't have a 3D printer with an AMS, so we're just going to sort of simulate what it would be like to print with an AMS. Technically, because we've got so many different colors, and you can see I've set up these colors here on the left side, and that's done by just hitting this plus button, and you'll see it'll add another one, and then I can click here and I can, check the colors. If you wanted to make these colors be specific to your artwork, you could actually go in here and you could look at the actual values over here. But keep in mind that these colors are actually not indicative, at least I don't believe, are indicative of what colors it's going to print in. This is just for organization's sake in the application. Your colors will actually more than likely be determined by your AMS system and whatever filaments that you are feeding into your 3D printer. So just keep that in mind. I've done this here for organization's sake, so I can visualize it, and these colors are not exactly accurate to the artwork. It's just, like I said, for visualization purpose. But if you did have 2 AMS systems, which I've heard apparently you can use multiple AMS systems with a Bambu Lab printer, then you would technically be able to print both of these at the same time with up to 8 colors. We're using 6 colors here, so there we go. So I'm just going to grab my STL on my side monitor here, just drag it in, and you can see there we've got that one, and then we're going to drag in the wind up one, and there we go with that other one. So these should hopefully fit on the print bed without a problem. And this one is kind of over the boundary. So they're a little, just as ever so slightly too large, unfortunately. So I would probably, in all likelihood, it'd probably be more realistic to print these individually, like one at a time. But for the sake of our own sanity, I'm just going to select both of these, or let's see, can I select both at the same time? Yeah, I can. Control click. I'm not up to speed on Bambu Studio. I just recently got it, so I'll tongue-tied. I will control click both of these, and then I'll scale them down just a little bit to get them both to fit in the print space. Excuse me. I'm a little, I'm trying to speed through this to get it over with and make sure that I'm not taking up too much of your time. All right, so now if I want to assign those particular colors or those particular filaments to these pieces of artwork, I'm going to select one. I'm going to click this color painting option here, set our smart fill angle to 90 degrees. We'll select the black color and start with the background. Now select the red. We're going to do this, 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 and this. And then we'll select white. And then we'll click the letters of podcast. You can zoom in if it's a little easier so you don't misclick. And there we go. That's done. We'll select this one. And I believe here we'll do black for the background. And then the top is magenta, if I remember correctly, and the bottom is cyan. Let's double check the artwork. Yep. So we got magenta, we got our cyan. And then this is already yellow, so we're done. And there we go. We also have the wipe tower. We can just put that in the upper right-hand corner so it's not too close to the artwork. And that's that. And then we can hit preview just to get a preview for how this is going to print with our G code. And that's looking pretty good. We can also check how long it's going to take to print and all that other fun stuff. So it's got a preparation time of 6 minutes. It's got a full model printing time of about 4 hours and 40 minutes, give or take. So there we go. That's how to take some artwork, convert it into vector, and then get it ready for 3D printing. Obviously, you'll need to know a little bit more about setting up the settings for your 3D printer if you want to change your infill and things like that. But this would print out, I believe, pretty well, and you would have a nice little sign that you could hang off of something, or you could use it as a wearable. These are going to be around 7.5 to 8 inches in width, and maybe about 4 or 5 inches tall. And you could use it for whatever you wanted. Also, alternatively, if you wanted to print these as separate pieces, you could do that. Let me select this bottom piece here and hit P and separate it by selection. And let me show you really quickly something that I've done in the past that might be helpful to you. I'll duplicate this off to the side. And what I've done before is I'll duplicate a copy of this up. We'll take this. We will go into face mode, go from the side and select just the sort of middle faces here. So not the front and back, but just the middle ones. And once I've got that selected, I can hit Alt S and tap S again to turn on even thickness. And this will fatten the text just a slight amount, just a little bit. And then what I can do is I can kind of sink this into the surface of this bottom piece, select the bottom piece and hit Control minus, which sets up a Boolean. If you don't know how to set up a Boolean, I'm using an add-on for that. But essentially you'd add a modifier and then I would just search Boolean and then you'd do that. And then inside of the Boolean, you'd have an operand type of object and you'd set difference. And then the object to set the difference would be the text that we had pushed into the geometry. And that's how that would work. So now I'm going to hide the cutter here and you can see that we can create this sort of pushed in look. And if we wanted to, we could 3D print this separately and we could paint these colors or spray paint it or whatever. And then when we go to assemble it, we could slot them back into the recesses that we created with that slightly enlarged version of the 3D print stuff. Alternatively, another thing that I've done that seems to work really well, let me get my 3D cursor over here, is I can create like a cone or a cylinder over here. Let's scale that down. And I can create little pegs. So that's something that I've done before that seems to work pretty well in certain instances. Obviously, you want to be careful about the proportion of your pegs and how tall they are. Let's switch this back to median point. And also, I like to usually make them a little bit pointy, so that way the top is a little bit smaller. And then I'll put pegs that 3D print on here, and I'll use a Boolean to sort of make this something like that. And then I'll make a copy and just move it straight up, since we moved this straight up, and just sort of intersect that in there. And you would want to make sure that that these are lined up correctly and you have the same amount in this as is coming out of the base there. That way you don't have too much of a peg coming up and not enough room for it in the geometry. So you might want to drop this back down and check all that first. But then you could take this and you could just slightly fatten this one here and like do a negative Boolean to take it out of this shape here and then hide that, and you'd have a hole in the bottom of this that would then fit onto the peg down here. I hope that makes sense. But that would also allow you to get additional security when you're putting the letters down and get them to kind of adhere to the base a little bit better. You could also use super glue or any other type of adhesive that gets these two parts to work together. And that I've gotten pretty good success at doing that, doing it that way. It works pretty well for me. But hopefully this has been an enlightening experience for you. If you've got any questions or comments, leave them in the comment section down below. And I will see you in the next video. Thanks for watching and take care.